Welcome back for our special episode of book reviews. Animal Farm by George Orwell.
Oh, I thought I said Georgie, like George or
Georgie Orwell.
Good old Georgie. Fun fact: his name's actually Eric.
But how are you doing, Jordan? This is our 6th episode into this, and we are about to cross over into the month of November.
I know, that's pretty crazy. You know, I feel good about this. I think this was a fun. Well, I mean, fun is a little bit relative in this sense, as we're going to get into, but it is a fun and very interesting and eye-opening book, which is what I think George was going for in this. So I'm very excited. And I think, you know, this special episode of Book Club, we're going to be doing these more often, we're thinking, but definitely still keeping News Corner around, but adding Book Club into the mix. And I promise it won't be as boring as a book sounds if you're not much of a reader.
It also just depends on, I guess our length of time of doing this is going to depend on the book that we pick and how long it is and how difficult of a read it is.
Well, I was thinking we do the Iliad next.
I don't know what the Iliad is.
Okay,
actually.
It's like 800 pages.
You know, it's funny. It's like if it comes to a book that makes me think, 800 pages is a lot. If it comes to a fictional book and it is several thousand pages, I have no problem getting through that in a couple of months.
See, when I was growing up, like I was not much of a fiction reader. Like the only things that I would read was theology. And I read mostly C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
Because it interested me more. Like I cared about stories, but I don't know why I didn't like fiction. Even with movies and stuff, I'm not like as into movies. Like even before the pandemic.
You're not really into them that much.
No, I'm not. And I think it's just kind of the way I'm wired where I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And if I end up seeing a movie, I'm just like thinking about the different ramifications of it. I'm kind of thinking about the worldly meaning, political meaning, spiritual meaning, mental meaning, and all that good stuff. So I don't know. It's just not really. I do enjoy movies. I just watched one a couple days ago. I watched Black Widow.
I haven't seen that one, actually.
Okay,
I've been meaning to.
Okay, it's not half bad. I think it was actually pretty good.
I didn't think it was going to be bad. The only one that I think looked really awful was Captain Marvel, to be honest.
Yeah, I haven't seen Captain Marvel. I haven't heard amazing things about it, but
it was just kind of tossed in last minute into the Avengers saga, and I was like, I don't know this character. She doesn't mean that much to me. Every other character we've grown with throughout the course of, I think minimum 3 movies for each one.
Except for Black Panther.
No, he had his own movie and he had Civil War, and then he was in Avengers and Endgame. So 4 movies.
I always think about like before the Endgame and Infinity War.
Yeah, I guess before you started bringing all of them into it.
Because I don't count those, where I'm like, I don't count those.
Yeah, and I would say as cool as Black Panther is, I was less invested in his character compared to Iron Man, Thor, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Hulk.
Fair enough. But Black Widow was good.
Even Loki I'm more invested in than...
I am invested in Loki. He's great. But yeah, Black Widow was not a half bad movie. Yeah, I'd recommend people watch it. It made the characters female and still strong, and it made sense. So that's what I have to say about that. But I am, as I've said, I'm much more of a nonfiction reader than I am a fiction reader. But I think what interests me about dystopian novels, this one's a novella, is that it has worldly implications, that it's mirroring something.
Right.
And I think Animal Farm it was mirroring a specific point in our history. I think it was published in 1943. So this was Soviet Russia, USSR. And so he was fighting to get this book published because a lot is very interesting. You think, well, we look back in history and we go, well, obviously the Russians were bad and they were horrible. What they were doing was wrong. But the way that information was spreading at this point, there was a lot of propaganda. There was a lot of trying to push things down. There was a lot of public opinion pressure that was stopping this from getting published. So with that being said, I thought we would talk first, obviously, about the book itself and just talk about what the book is about. Obviously, it's called Animal Farm. And I gotta give my first impression on Animal Farm. I was not expecting this kind of plot. Like, I went into it not even knowing a bit about any of it.
Really? Okay.
No, like nothing. All I knew it was by George Orwell. I knew it was representing a time that I didn't know about. I haven't lived through. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read this. And I'm gonna go in. So let's go ahead. Tell me a little bit about the plot, Connor.
Oh, honestly, I don't know. If I had to sum it up in a single word, it's that it's circular. Is where the book begins is essentially where it ends, despite all the different motives and trials that the animals on the farm went through. Is they ended up right back where they began. Yeah.
And let me go ahead and just kind of start from the beginning with that. I actually think I didn't even think of that. I think that is dead on. But so here's how it kind of goes, right? There's this farm called Manor Farm. It's run by a guy named Mr. Jones. He's kind of a drunk. He does feed the animals, but it's just kind of, he's obviously ruling over them.
Yeah, and he's a pretty lackadaisical farmer. Like, he doesn't work terribly hard, but he's also not lazy. He just he gets enough done, it seems. Yeah,
he's kind of mediocre, I would say.
He gets enough done to make sure his animals don't die, which means they're being fed kind of minimalistically. And he does enough to put a paycheck in his pocket, but he's not by any means an amazing farmer. It sounds like they kind of described that back in the day he was a pretty good farmer, but eventually he became an alcoholic. And
yep, and that the alcohol is important in the story too. But yeah, he's this farmer, and so they have this boar, right, that's about ready to pass away soon.
Yep.
Old Mayor, if I remember correctly.
Old Major.
Old Major?
Yep, Old Major.
Old Major. Old Major, he kind of gives sort of I kind of describe it as the MLK speech of I Have a Dream, where he kind of tells the animals, he's like, I have a dream that we're going to be free.
Well, he literally had a dream.
No, he literally did have a dream. He's like, we're going to be free and we're going to make this happen and, fulfill this. And I have a dream. That's kind of how I would describe it. And then, old Major dies.
Yep.
And so.
Which he also predicted.
He did predict he was going to die. But what happens essentially is that we have all these different animals, right? We have pigs, we have hens, we have sheep, we have horses, we do have the dogs, we do have cats.
We got different types of horses too. Some goats. We got a raven.
Horses are goats. Goats are horses. Oh. You said we have different kinds of horses, and you said
different kinds of horses. We also have goats.
Oh, okay. You said you're like, oh yeah, different kinds of horses. We have goats, and I was like, wait, Connor, what do you know about the human species that I don't?
Pigs, raven, cat. Yeah, because they had cart horses. They had a mare. There was Boxer. He wasn't a cart horse, or was he a cart horse?
Nope, I don't remember.
Okay, I'm checking my notes right now. He is.
Because I was going to say, if anything, Clover was going to be one of the weaker horses, but Boxer was the strong horse.
Clover and Boxer would have been the two stronger ones. The mare, Molly, was the weaker of the horses. Yeah, she's for show.
Yeah, and she doesn't really make it super far into the book.
Hers is interesting.
Yeah.
There's a couple outlier characters like Molly and the cat, which I don't actually think has a name.
It's just the cat.
Yeah, the cat, the raven, Moses, and of course Benjamin the donkey. But there's a few outlying characters that I really appreciated anytime they came in, because I was like, I want to know what these ones are doing.
Yeah, no, some of them were kind of, they said that the pigs were the most clever ones. I would say it was the cat. I think it was 100% the cat. But I want to make it through this plot just so that people have an idea of what's going on. And so eventually, Old Major dies, and then they lead a revolt against Mr. Jones. The pigs do, with the animals, and they're like, hey, victory, all of this wonderful stuff. And essentially, they're like, we're going to rename the farm from Manor Farm to Animal Farm. We're going to run it ourselves. We're going to farm. And you kind of have to suspend some belief here in regards to pigs being able to talk, animals being able to talk, and them actually being able to manage this farming equipment, which they kind of show that as Orwell shows that as a struggle in the book, as they're trying to build a windmill and they don't know how to do it with trying to break the stones, and so they do find a way to do it, and they end up doing it with Boxer, who has to rebuild that thing about 3 different times.
Definitely seems like, I think it's important to note that after Old Major gave this prophetic vision he had for everybody, that the animals set to work like getting ready for it. They're like, I don't know if it's going to be in our lifetime, but we're going to be ready for it.
Right.
And sure enough, it was in their lifetime. It was just a few months later, I believe.
Yeah, it was pretty shortly after.
It was pretty shortly after, and it came after like a whole weekend, like Friday through Sunday or something, of Farmer Jones just going out, getting drunk, not taking care of the farm, hasn't fed any of the animals, and they finally just have enough.
Right.
And so they run off Mr. Jones and his wife and the helpers.
Right.
On the farm. And then, like you said, they kind of lay claim to the farm. They change it from they change it from manor farm to animal farm. And then they lay down their 7 commandments.
Yes, I'm actually trying to find them in the book right now.
I've got them written down.
Oh, he got them? Oh, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay.
So number 1 is whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. This is the second one. Number 3, no animal shall wear clothes. 4, no animal shall sleep in a bed. 5, no animal shall drink alcohol. 6, no animal shall kill any other animal. And 7, all animals are equal. And they kind of made these up based on the fact that they believe humans to be inherently bad towards animals. So it's like if the humans did it, then we don't want to touch it. And they didn't include it. They didn't include it in their commandments, but they also didn't want to have like any type of trade or communication. No human that walked upon 2 legs was to be allowed in the farm.
And they had to explain to the birds that they were okay.
Because they have
wings. They have wings, and then but they're like, we only have 2 legs, and it's like, what does that mean for us? And
all I could think is if this farm had been in Australia and you had kangaroos hopping around on 2 legs.
Yeah, if I think if Orwell was Australian, like I feel like the kangaroos would have been the pigs in this situation.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe because kangaroos kind of resemble deer to me, and deer are just not that intelligent. They're frightened easily, so that's how they survive, but they are not intelligent at all. And that seems to be the case there. Like kangaroos are Australia's deer. It's that annoying animal that you hit on the road with your car and you have to go get it fixed. That's what they are.
But you brought up a good point about, just how smart animals are, and they kind of play on this. Like they have sheep.
Oh my god!
And the sheep are so dumb. They always just bleat out 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and that's all they do.
That's the only one.
I think that's the only line that they have in this entire book is 4 legs bad.
It changes towards
good,
the
2
end.
legs. Yes. Well, that's what we'll get to.
We'll get there, but yeah, they don't do anything.
They really, but honestly, they do, though. They do in regards to the message that they're trying, the very basic message that they're trying to send.
Yes.
The pigs have trained them to do this, as we see throughout the book. And kind of, I'm going to give the end away a little bit with this, but the pigs are ultimately they are claimed in the book to be the cleverest ones, and they kind of end up doing everything to their own advantage.
That is exactly what they do.
It is exactly
so it's very
what they
fitting
do.
to call them pigs.
Well, and I think that's where some of this. So as far as I know, the pigs were supposed to represent like the Soviet Union, and I think people had like basically calling them pigs, and so I think that's where some of the uproar was, because everyone knew what the pigs represented. And they're like, oh no, we can't do that. But I think it made sense that they were pigs, and what ends up happening is, as the story progresses, they're like, great, we're going to farm, we're going to do all this stuff ourselves. And for a while it works out.
Yeah,
but
I think like that summer, that like summer, spring, like it all works out. Like they have a more bountiful harvest than Farmer Jones had ever done before. And, their rations are good, and they're pretty, it's socialism.
Well,
is what it is. Everybody's been delegated work that they can do to the best of their ability. And they kind of have like, everybody gets up and we work from this time until this time, and any other work you do is voluntary. So they kind of work into this system pretty well. And there's a character we haven't mentioned here. One of the other pigs is Snowball.
Yes. So the 2 main leaders of this are 2 pigs.
Yep.
Named Napoleon.
Yep.
Who ends up being the main pig throughout the entire book. And then there's Snowball, the other pig. And
Snowball starts out as kind of the main pig. He's got great speeches and good reasoning, and seems to be looking out for the animals. Although I have to go back and look in the book and see which one of them I know definitely drank the milk.
Well, they all did. So that's the whole.
Not the first time. The first time they did not. So the very first time, like after they ran Farmer Jones out, it's like, all right, well now we need to go start. I don't remember if they were harvesting or if they were planting.
Well, the cows were engorged.
Right, they were engorged. So that first one, the pig's trotters, which is really funny, just all the different ways they have them use this in the book, from milking the cows to writing to painting and assembling.
They have them doing just crazy stuff, but in an animal way, though.
Yeah, in an animal way, but it's just great because I'm just picturing this pig's little feet just kind of like pinching whatever it can and trying to handle it.
Right.
But yeah, they milk the cows and they're like, well, what do we do with the milk? Like, they didn't normally take the milk. And all the animals go back to work. And I want to say it's Napoleon, actually.
All we know is that the frothy.
Yep, it's Napoleon.
So Napoleon does take, and that makes sense because Napoleon was kind of ends up being the bad guy.
He is the devious one
in the end, and they the frothy. I remember this very specifically. The frothy milk disappeared, and like, where did the frothy milk go?
And they didn't know, and nobody really questioned it, and they didn't investigate it. And later on, and this was kind of my first sign that things were going to go bad.
Yes,
is that the pigs, and at the time, this is Snowball included. It was like, well, we need like the best ingredients, to be able to think for you guys and to run this farm. So we need the milk.
Right. Yep. That was mine too, where I was like, aha.
I was like, this is going to go bad. This is going to go bad real quick.
This is really bad. Yep. And I feel like, again, it does kind of go into that socialism of this starts to get into the whole a phrase that we've heard a lot this year of rules for thee, but not for me. And you see this continually with these pigs where they end up taking the milk, which I think for an animal and even for me as a human, I love milk. I love milk so much. I just love milk. Okay, but so that's why I was so connected to the frothy milk, because I'm like, oh, milk is so good.
Yes, farm fresh milk.
Yes, I don't get farm fresh milk. I have a lactose allergy. Well, it's a lactose allergy.
It's lactose. Same for me. I just can't do milk.
Yeah.
Ice cream, cheese, all that's fine, but milk itself, I can't seem to handle very much of.
Love milk. But then you see as they keep going. So the pigs kind of start off fairly not friendly, but they seems like they're trying to reason things through, and the animals are kind of dumb. So here's something also important to know is that most of them can't read.
Most of them can't read, and most of them are quite stupid.
Especially the sheep. And to an extent, so Boxer was probably the more tragic story for me throughout all of this. It was horrible.
Because he was like the biggest and strongest animal there by far. He could put in the most work, did the work of probably half the farm animals on his own. And his motto became, I will work harder. So when something wasn't going right, or they were short in supply, like, it didn't matter at what point, it was just, I will work harder. Mm-hmm. As he took on the burden completely on his own, and I don't want to give away until we get there. So we're just kind of starting to paint the picture of what the farm looks like. So, it's in disarray with Mr. Jones. They push him out. They take over. Snowball and Napoleon are always butting heads over ideas. It doesn't even matter if they both have a good idea. They just kind of spit on the other one's ideas because it wasn't theirs.
Right. And what ends up happening is that Snowball has an idea for a windmill.
Yep.
I always say windmill. I think it's a windmill.
Yeah, it's a windmill.
Yeah, but
the windmill to generate electricity.
To generate electricity, and Napoleon's just against it for one way or the other. The book doesn't really say why, he just kind of is. Mm-hmm. Eventually he runs Snowball out, and then he tells a bunch of lies about Snowball and like makes up a bunch of things. We don't even, honestly, in the book, I still even can't tell how much of it was true and how much of it wasn't.
About Snowball, the lies, or
just all the things that Napoleon said about him.
Everything that Napoleon said about him, I think, was a lie.
And that's what I thought in the beginning. And then he started questioning some of the animals to see if they were working for Snowball.
Right.
And then some of them said that they were. So then I wasn't 100% sure which ones were lies and then which parts weren't.
Let's get to that one a little bit later.
Right. That's why I'm not trying to
progress through the story here. So Napoleon, like you said, Snowball gets run off. I think it's important to know how he got run off too, because until now, like Napoleon's. Oh, and we did have people come back to the farm. Mr. Jones and 4 or 5 helpers came back.
Yeah, and they did try to take over the farm, and so there's kind of that tension between human beings still and the animals.
Yes, they're still contentious. They're still mistrusting. The humans don't like that they see this farm being run by animals. It just seems like nature's inverted itself, and so they try to go reestablish dominion over the farm. And the I think it was mainly Snowball, but Snowball and Napoleon, they had agreed that this was probably going to happen and they should prepare for it. And Snowball and Napoleon taught themselves to read and to write. And Snowball ended up reading Julius Caesar and taking note of his war tactics. And so they had a whole defensive plan up. The people try to attack, the animals run them off. I think 1 sheep died in the process. Snowball did abstain injuries, and I want to specify this because there's a lot of changes that get made to the story of Snowball as time progresses through the farm because of Napoleon.
And that's what's so interesting as it continues on, is that Napoleon kind of keeps, it's almost like I'd say it's almost like some level of like ignorant gaslighting, where he kind of just keeps changing things. So we have like the different rules, like no animal
changes all the rules.
Yeah. Like no animal can sleep on a bed, right? And eventually Napoleon starts sleeping in the farmhouse, and there's a rule to not sleep in the farmhouse. That's where humans are, and all that. Yeah,
they kind of had like memorialized the farmhouse. It was like, right, you don't go in here. We're gonna leave this here as a memory of our triumph and what we came from and stuff like that. So it was like, you don't go in there, you don't sleep there, you don't do any of that stuff, and it's in one of their rules. You shall not sleep in a bed. Well, they change it
to you shall not sleep in a bed with sheets.
That's correct. And all of them change like that. No animal shall drink alcohol to excess. I don't know if they explicitly changed number 6, the no animal shall kill any other animal. I think
without cause.
Without cause is what it changed to.
And the reason why that's really important, because every time in the book Napoleon breaks a rule, and there's always the one animal, I don't remember which one it is, but they're like, hey, can you read the 7 commandments that are on the barn wall? And so someone reads them, and each time they read them, they're like, hey, why is Napoleon in a bed? And he's like, oh, well, it's because he's not sleeping on it with sheets. And then there's also another pig named Squealer who ends up becoming kind of the commander-in-chief.
The propaganda.
Yes, he's a propagandist. I don't even know if that's the correct word, but whatever. The commander-in-chief for Napoleon. He's like, well, of course, he can sleep in a bed. Like, hay is a bed too. Of course we can sleep in bed, but it's the sheets that make it human. It's the clothes. And then all the animals are like, oh, well, okay, now that you explain it like that. And then eventually there comes a point where Napoleon thinks that there are traitors in the midst of the farm, and so some of the animals come forward and say that they are, and this is where it gets dark. I'm making it to the dark part of the story, where he slaughters them. He has them killed, and he has these 2 dogs. And
no, he's got more than 2 dogs.
Oh, I thought he started off with 2 dogs. Okay, so I have an illustrated version of this, and so all I see in there, I'm like, oh, the 2 dogs. I'm like, there's 2 dogs, but he has a lot of dogs.
He has 9. So
he has 9 dogs.
He has 9 dogs.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know he had 9 dogs at that point.
I want to double check
because I know he took a litter of puppies, and no one knew where they went.
He took 9 puppies, and this is before Snowball got run off. So he took 9 puppies from the litter. I forget which dogs it was, but 2 of the 3 dogs. He takes the 9 and he makes himself like the sole proprietor for their education and their well-being. And he takes them off to wherever his little part of the farm is, and they're not seen of again for several chapters until Snowball makes his convincing argument. This is the thing. So the animals started off with like this type of like weekly meeting where they would kind of have like their national anthem saying, and they would have all the discussions about how they would progress. And this is normally where the arguments between Snowball and Napoleon would come out. And Snowball makes his gigantic presentation for the windmill, and Napoleon doesn't really have anything better to say or any way to discredit it. So he just doesn't say anything. And then he like lets out like a squealing whistle, and all these dogs, these big ferocious dogs come in. They're adolescent dogs now. So they're the size of most of these animals, or bigger than save the horses. And they chase Snowball out of the farm, and that's the end of Snowball. So military takeover.
Yep. And that's when Napoleon becomes more and more controlling. So they have to work harder on the windmill. They have less food, but the pigs always seem to be getting fatter. And then he sleeps in the farmhouse. Napoleon becomes more human with time, is what you end up learning. Mm-hmm. And then he ends up killing these animals, and they're just in shock. And they're
via the dogs, because he has the muscle now.
Right. I mean, he just has them killed.
Yeah.
Has them killed. And they're like, wait a minute. I thought we weren't supposed to kill other animals. And because it's one of the commandments. And so they go to the commandments and they're like, oh, it's, you can't kill another animal without cause.
Yep.
And so it's always like this added.
I guess that's cause. Yeah. There's all these little like subtexts that are added to each commandment.
There's always something added to each commandment that is just to kind of make things happen favorably. And Napoleon then ends up finding some liquor that he hadn't originally found in the years past. And so he ends up drinking that, getting sick. But then they're like, wait a minute, you can't drink that either. And like, oh, it's without, no excess.
Yep. Can't drink to excess.
And the only
so he starts having these whims as well. So he initially, after getting drunk and then sick and nearly dying, which is what the animals thought, initially it was like you are not to have alcohol at all or you'll die. You'll be put to death. And then he kind of changes it. So he goes on another whim. He's like, okay, with you can't drink to excess. Because we see him make a couple of these like whimsical decisions on the fly. As it goes, as he gets more introduced to more people things, like he'll initially be like, no, we don't want to have contact with them, but it's okay in this sense.
Right. He just kind of slowly keeps moving towards breaking all of the commandments. And what's interesting about all the commandments is about the way that he's positioned compared to the other animals, that he's the only one who can break them. Like think about with him sleeping in the bed, all the animals could also break that rule too, but they don't have access to the farmhouse. So only Napoleon gets to enjoy that thing. He's the only one that has the alcohol, therefore he has access to the thing, but they barely have enough food. And then regarding killing an animal, he's the only one that, okay, actually this was interesting, he is the only one perceived to have the means to kill another animal.
Yes.
But we know that there's other animals that could. They're just almost kind of...
Boxer could easily. In fact, he almost kills one of the dogs during that first slaughtering.
Right.
With the first slaughtering of the supposedly treacherous animals. And I was actually... you brought up a good point that maybe some of it about Snowball was true. Although Snowball never appears again, and there's no hard information that says that he was actually involved with the other animals on the farm, trying to sabotage what Napoleon did. And that's why I still think that it's kind of a lie, because he changed everything about it. So we mentioned earlier that Snowball kind of took part of the buckshot from a gunshot from Mr. Jones that killed one of the sheep, and he was declared a war hero from that. Him and Boxer, and then the sheep kind of got post-mortem death kind of award. And Napoleon changes everything about it. So it initially was that Snowball was a hero, and then Napoleon changes a little bit more.
He was like a sleeper. He was like a spy for Mr. Jones.
He said, I think it was something to the effect that he was trying to make the animals lose.
Yeah, and then there was a point where he's like, no, he was with Mr. Jones.
With Mr. Jones, and he cried. What was it? It was like death to Animal Farm or something. So he just slowly keeps moving the goalpost and changes it to the point that Snowball was on the team with the people and was dead set against the farm, and then blames Snowball for everything bad that ever happens on the farm. I feel like that seems so similar to something. I think about that now.
I think there is a speech that Joe Biden gave at the some sort of Virginia rally for Terry McAuliffe.
I don't know the speech.
No, I just don't remember the guy's last name. It's like McLaughlin or something like that. But he's losing a little bit, which is unexpected, and that's why they pulled out Joe Biden. But there was literally this clip of him blaming everything on Trump. Like it was like it was almost like a 20-second clip of him in this speech saying Trump, 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 Trumpity, Trump, 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 Trump. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the president of the United States. Like there's always somebody else to blame. Like they won't take any responsibility. It seems really similar.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was like, that kind of seems sort of similar. There's always like this lurking somebody else who's not even at the farm, like, excuse me, not even the president anymore. And then suddenly they have, and same thing with this, animal farm where they're blaming it on someone and they're making up stories about someone that's not even at the farm anymore. Like there was all of these rumors about which farm he went to. There's like a couple different ones. I wish I could remember the names of the two of them.
Frederick Farm and
like
I can't remember. Pinchington or something.
Yeah.
It's
Pinkleton?
Something like that. Either way, the adjacent farms, the human farmers are still really weirded out by the animal farm. Don't really want to do anything with them. They actually take advantage of Napoleon too, and they pay him in fake money for like a pile of cedar wood that the animals weren't going to use, and they pay him in fake money. That's one of the other interesting aspects is that Napoleon gets a human broker to go back and forth to start selling off some of the crops and the produce, the eggs from the farm to procure money to buy parts for the windmill. So they're starting getting more industrious, but they keep, like you said, they keep becoming more and more people-like. Exactly.
And we kind of make it to the point where we have Boxer, right? So we're kind of making it to the end of the book a little bit, I think, at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Boxer, who has for years, he's close to retirement.
Well, supposed retirement.
Yeah,
they had set retirements in respect to different animals, how long they would tend to live. So horses retired at like age 12. Chickens like age 3. Yeah, they all had different ones, and Boxer at this point is age 11.
Yeah, so he's getting really close, but he has to keep hauling these stones up and down, to break them for the windmill.
And the work has more than doubled at this point, actually. And we kind of glossed over this, but they had the windmill about halfway done, and there was a second attack by people. I think around 10, it was either 10 or 20, I can't remember exactly, but they all brought guns. They all brought guns this time, and the animals were able to fend them off, not nearly as well as the last time, by the way. Quite a few animals died in the process. Boxer was injured and all that stuff, but the people had pushed the animals back long enough that they were able to go drill a hole into the windmill, the half-finished windmill, which the animals really struggled to do because they don't have a way to break apart the rocks and stuff like that. So they had to drag them up to a cliff and then drop them off the cliff and break them and then drag them back up in a cart and start stacking this windmill. And the humans blow up the windmill. And so I think they had made it to 18 inches thick, and they're like, we're going to double it. We're going to do 36 inches thick. So we're talking 3 inches thick of stone. But on top of that, because Napoleon has set himself up as the top male pig or boar, he gets to mate with all the female pigs now by himself, and they have a litter of over 30 different piglets. So now they need a school built for the piglets as well. So now we're building the windmill doubly thick. We're building a school for the piglets. Boxer's nearing the end of his age. So the work just keeps increasing, and at this time the rations are going down and down and down. Napoleon also manipulates the farm to look as if they're doing good. They fill the troughs with sand and then they top it with food. So when their broker comes by, he looks at it and he goes, oh, they're doing really well. And he goes out and spreads these essentially rumors that Animal Farm's doing fantastic being managed by the animals.
That sounds communist to me.
And it was. No, that is
exactly
so
it.
much of that Russia did at the time was just put on this front, and China as well. They put on this front that they're doing good. North Korea as well. They're all in there, all the communist ones. And Napoleon falls right in step with that, is that appearances are everything. And they do not want to appear weak to the people. They don't want to appear like they are doing poorly. And they just fake all this stuff. And leading all of it up to Boxer being like, oh, I'm going to retire soon, but I'll work harder. His second motto that he got, by the way, Napoleon is always right.
Yes.
Those are like the two things he can remember. He couldn't get past ABC in the alphabet, but those are his two mottos that he stuck to. and him and some of the other animals, you mentioned it earlier, like they would question when something would happen, like, is this how it always was? And they'd go back and look, and like Boxer would just always reassured himself. Like, you go back and look at the law, and they'd ask the donkey or the goat to read it. He's like, well, I guess that's the way it was. Napoleon's always right. I will work harder, and goes back to work. Longer than all the other animals, by the way. He starts volunteering to, like, I think by the end of it, he's like working an hour before them and then an hour afterwards. Oh, they don't get Sundays off anymore. So
right,
it's all starting to revert back to Jones.
Except to a certain extent, it was a little bit better with Jones, but
so that's something that I was curious in the book, and it wasn't ever properly divulged, although maybe it was purposely done that way. Is that with Jones, no matter what the animals did, a portion of it was being sold off automatically to go feed humans. But the farm still takes some sort of a pride in the fact that they're not run by people and that most of the crops are for them, despite the fact that the pigs are now selling off parts of the crop for different advantages, specifically for pig kind.
Right. It's some level of justification. But basically what happens to Boxer is that I think something happens to one of his lungs.
One of his lungs gives out
while he's hauling these stones. And so Napoleon sends word, because he doesn't come out anymore. He only sends Squealer to go do his stuff. If he does
come out, it's like a whole procession.
Pretty much. He's like their leader. And I think they changed from calling him Comrade Napoleon to like leader Comrade Napoleon or something.
His title gets more extensive.
It gets more extensive, more extreme. They end up putting guards next to his bed because of threats and all this stuff. So Napoleon is now kind of their king, and he says, hey, don't worry, we're going to get him the best hospital care that there could be. And so they load him into this little, I guess.
Like they call it a van, but it was
yeah.
It was carriaged by 2 horses, so
something along those lines. But someone reads it, and it might have been Benjamin.
It was Benjamin the donkey. He's the one that came and got all the animals. And was like, they're taking Boxer away, and they all get there and like, all right, bye Boxer, get better. Benjamin's like, no, you idiots.
They're taking him to a slaughterhouse because and then this is really sad. They try to tell Boxer, and he tries to kick out, and eventually he doesn't. And then
but he couldn't kick out because he was too old and too weak at that point.
Right. And Squealer comes back to him and is like, listen, I hear there are these rumors that, we took him to a slaughterhouse, but don't worry, that wasn't a slaughterhouse. The person that we sent him to, they had just bought that van and they hadn't got the chance to change the lettering and names on it. So we were by his side. Napoleon was by his side, and his last words were,
oh my gosh.
I
kind of want to find those last words.
Napoleon is always right. And of course, all the animals are just, they're so relieved. And I'm just like, this is horrible. This is awful. And at this point to the reader, it's insanely obvious that Squealer is lying.
I'm trying to find exactly what it was that he had said.
Trying to remember which chapter. I want to say it was definitely in one of the later chapters.
It's in chapter 9. Oh, I think I found it. I was, Squealer's talking. He says, I'm beside his bedside at the very last, and at the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear. Like, okay, Squealer has like a knack for storytelling. He's really good at describing it, and this is what convinces these animals who, I mean, I guess some of them were just too dumb. But then others didn't put enough work into learning. Like the horses just kind of like, I can't get past this. It's fine. Right. I'll just work. But yeah, he just has this really vivid way of painting a picture and story to the point that he changes their mind multiple times. I actually made a list. It's probably not an exhaustive list, but I've got 9 items on it. I'll read through it in a little bit. That says all the different things that he changed about what the animals knew to be true in the beginning after the rebellion. But he says at the end, almost too weak to speak, Boxer whispered in my ear that his sole sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. Because they didn't get to finish it. It was like the first one, like they finished and then it got blown up. I forgot. No, they built it halfway. The tree from that storm fell on it and broke it apart. And then they finished it. The humans came and blew it up, and then they made it again and they made it thicker.
Right.
Along with his glass. So poor Boxer just hauled rocks his entire life. That's what he did. But supposedly the last words that Squealer says, Boxer whispers into his ear is, "Forward, comrades." Forward in the name of the rebellion. Long live Animal Farm. Long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right. These were his very last words, comrades.
Oh my gosh.
And they all buy it.
Yeah, nope, they're pretty dumb. And
they should have known that wasn't Boxer, because he didn't have those many words in his vocabulary. It couldn't have possibly been him.
Yeah, they're not incredibly smart, but not only that, this was a slow process.
It was a slow process.
Continued to happen, and eventually what ends up happening, to kind of sum up the rest of the plot so we can talk a little bit more about the book in general and how it applies now, is that eventually they take the sheep, they take them away for weeks, and then the animals see them and they see something incredibly frightening. They see the pigs are now walking on 2 legs.
That's right.
The pigs are walking on 2 legs, and now the sheep are, I'm trying to remember what they said, and I'm looking for it because I want to make sure I quote it correctly. They say 4 legs good, 2 legs better. 4 legs good, 2 legs better. And this went on for 5 minutes without stopping.
Yeah, by the way, the sheep, not only do they chant only the most simplistic of ideas, but they shout down everybody else that tries to talk.
That's exactly, sounds so like things that we know now.
It's a little bit too relatable in some instances, but that is what the sheep would do, is they just bleat, these phrases over and over and over again, and they'd get louder and louder until everybody finally just like gave up trying to talk back or submit their ideas, and it would just kind of end the discussion. That's essentially what they did. And
I think that's a really important point for now, where I feel like I hear very simplistic ideas, right? And we even talked about in the podcast where I say I hear some of the people's arguments on the other side of the aisle, and I understand that there's compassion and there's empathy, but it's been so simplified to where they're missing so much of the meat, and you almost can't even have an argument with them anymore, and it just kind of shuts it down. And I don't mean to. I understand I'm accidentally comparing them to these sheep, but I think we all do it to a certain level. Even in the Bible, we are referred to as sheep. All of humanity is like sheep. We are easily led astray, right? So this is something that's not just for other people and not me and you, but it's for us too. Is sometimes we just so simplify down ideas and we yell at people and to get them to be quiet because we have our idea. And I think I feel like I see this a lot. At least a lot in America. I can't really speak for other countries. I imagine it does happen, but I just don't know those other countries very well, nor do I have a lot of research on it. But I think that's something that really bothers me. And you kind of have no choice but to be quiet. Where I even think about Proverbs, where I'm just like, how long do I want to argue? Should I argue with a fool, or should I just leave it alone? Like if they're just not gonna do anything, should I just? Maybe this isn't worth the argument and this isn't worth the time, Right. But anyway, they see this scene. And so from the book, it says, for once, Benjamin consented to break his rule, and he read out to her what was written on the wall. There was nothing there now except a single commandment. It ran, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. After that, it did not seem strange when the next day the pigs who were supervising the work of the farm all carried whips in their trotters. It did not seem strange to learn that the pigs had bought themselves a wireless set, were arranging to install a telephone, and had taken out subscriptions to John Bull, Tidbits, and the Daily Mirror. That's a real publication, by the way. Yeah, still ongoing. I went and looked up all of these things just to see what they all were. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, but they're just basically becoming more human. Napoleon has a pipe in his mouth. He's wearing clothes now. They came out with whips. Yep, and he has a black coat. Leather They're fatter leggings. Than ever, by the way. They are very fat. And so basically, he's become Mr. Jones. You're correct. It's completely circular. And eventually he ends up having this whole meeting with the neighboring farmers and were like, oh, we're so sorry. We thought that you were against us, and now we realize you're for us. And Napoleon's like, well,
you're just like us.
Exactly, you're just like us. And of course, we weren't trying to hurt you, which was not true. Like, they did not like human beings.
The humans shot at them, and the animals, one of them almost died. A couple of the people almost died via Boxer or the dogs. But yeah, it's so amusing to see them come together and be like, let's drink and play cards and smoke cigars. And we were never trying to hurt you. We were, they were all just misconceptions and rumors that came out of the farm. I don't know who spread them. It's probably that darn Snowball.
That dang Snowball. But here's the part that kind of ends it all, right? Mm-hmm. So they're doing this kind of fancy dinner together and just kind of celebrating. And one of the farmers makes a speech, just kind of praising Napoleon, and I think it's Pinkleton. Mm-hmm. Pinkleton. Napoleon, and then quote, had only one criticism, he said, to make of Mr. Pinkleton's excellent and neighborly speech. Mr. Pinkleton had referred throughout to Animal Farm. He could not, of course, know, for he, Napoleon, was only now for the first time announcing it, that the name Animal Farm had been abolished. Henceforth, the farm was to be known as the Manor Farm, which we talked about in the very beginning, and quote, which he believed was its correct and original name.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's kind of this end point. And I want to actually read the last two paragraphs.
I was going to ask, I was like, can we make sure we read the last two?
Yes, let's read these last two paragraphs.
They are important.
Where the animals are watching through a window this entire speech. All these animals. They're watching this whole gathering. Mm-hmm. They're watching it from the window. And so then, the animals, once Napoleon announced that, the animals kind of crept away. And this is years later now. And there's only a couple of animals that have been there since the beginning.
I think you have the horse, Clover. You have the horse, Clover. You have the goat, Marielle, and the donkey, Benjamin, and the crow, Moses. I think the raven. Those are the only ones left that might even vaguely remember what things were like before the rebellion. So they remember the era of Mr. Jones. They remember the rebellion and the leadership of Snowball, and then the takeover and the tyrannical rule of Napoleon.
Yep. But
by the way, the farm's actually doing good now, relatively speaking.
It's like relatively okay.
They had enough money to purchase 3 more horses. They've got other animals on the farm. In fact, it notes that there are more animals on the farm than there ever was in the past.
But I felt like the rations were still low.
The rations are still low. Yep.
So they're just like used to going to bed hungry, as they say in the book.
Business is good for the pigs.
Yeah, the pigs are always the ones that have, like, they are the animals that are more equal than others. They are the more superior animal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's because they set themselves up that way because of their intelligence. They're like, you need us to run the farm, so we need to be, at 100% health-wise. This is why we need more of the food, and this is why we need the comfy beds to sleep in so that we can get a good night's rest, and just all the different ways.
Because they never actually did any real manual labor at all.
No,
they did, and then the point and the book points this out pretty well, that they didn't do any of the work.
Yep,
they were just the brains. But let me actually read. I think actually it'd be best to read the last 3 paragraphs.
I'm good with that.
So this is my audition for being an audiobook reader. If you would like someone with a prepubescent boy voice to read your books, please give me a call. Whoever runs that kind of thing, I'd definitely like to. All right, so this is at the end when they're all celebrating, and Napoleon has finished his speech and proclaimed prosperity to the Manor Farm. Quote, there was the same hearty cheering as before, and the mugs were empty to the dregs, but as the animals outside gazed at the scene, it seemed to them that some strange thing was happening. What was it that had altered in the faces of the pigs? Clover's old dim eyes flitted one face to another. Some of them had 5 chins, some had 4, some had 3. But what was it that seemed to be melting and changing? Then, the applause having come to an end, the company took up their cards and continued the game that had been interrupted, and the animals crept silently away. But they had not gone 20 yards when they stopped short. An uproar of voices was coming from the farmhouse. They rushed back and looked through the window again. Yes, a violent quarrel was in progress. There were shoutings, bangings on the table, sharp, suspicious glances, furious denials. The source of the trouble appeared to be that Napoleon and Mr. Pingleton had each played an ace of spades simultaneously. 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question, now, what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. And that is the
full
end.
circle.
Yep, it is full circle. This story became much more frightening as it continued on.
Mm-hmm. In the beginning, it was kind of a fun, ironic tale of these farm animals trying to run a farm.
It's just so funny. Like, they have, like, once they take over the farm, they have, like, a funeral for the baked hams. You know, they bury them in the backyard and have a little funeral for them. And they have a little milk, and they're running this little farm together, and everything's great. And then it turns
made
violent.
all these customs and all this different stuff, where it seems like they're making progress,
Right,
and then
and
it goes quickly.
I know, it turns violent so fast, and I was like, I was not ready for this. Like, and my heart was broken when Boxer was taken away, and I was like, no, what is this?
That just, like, his character, I was like, there's no way this one has a good ending. Like, he is just so much the backbone of the farm. And a lot of their problems started was when Napoleon took over, and none of them did anything about it.
Right. Which was so weird. I was like, why didn't they do anything?
Just let it happen. Snowball was not the first animal to leave the farm, though.
That's right. There was Molly.
That one was interesting, and I really did try to figure out, and I don't think I have a conclusion, so I do want to talk about her. But maybe we can... I don't know if you want to talk more about the conclusion of the book first, because there's a couple curious characters in this that I just, we can figure out who the pigs are, and the sheep and the horses, and most of the other farm animals kind of fall into one of those categories of where they're at in the hierarchy of the farming government per se. Napoleon even changes it and says that we're a republic, and then everybody nominates him for leader
because he's the only one. Right.
And well, it's not like anybody was going to run up against him because they'd probably get killed.
Probably.
But early on, Molly seems to show like these. She reminisces about some of the things that she used to have. Kind of reminded me of the Israelites when they left Egypt, and they're out in the desert complaining to themselves. They're like, yeah, we used to have full bellies and this much time off, and they're just complaining about the slavery that they had before. And at first, that's kind of where I thought that this might go, but it doesn't go that way.
No.
But Molly's like, oh, like I miss having ribbons in my mane, and I miss eating sugar cubes, and
I miss that too.
Sugar cubes or ribbons in your hair?
Both, but the sugar isn't in cubes. It's just like in delicious pastries that I can't eat anymore.
Yeah. So Clover actually catches Molly talking with one of the farm helpers from one of the neighboring farms. And then a few days later, she disappears, and they don't know where she is for weeks until some pigeons report. And the pigeons were also propagandists. They would go around spreading whatever rumors it was that Napoleon told them to go spread. Like at one point they were cheering, they would go out decreeing death to one of the neighboring farms, and then Napoleon would get on good terms with that farm. They'd turn around and they go decree death to the other farm. Those were one of the other whims. It's just like, oh, I don't know which one I like better. Bipolar leader. But yeah, so they see that Molly is out there with a freshly brushed coat and braided hair with ribbons and being fed sugar cubes. So she escapes everything that happens on the farm, and I just really couldn't figure out, what does this one represent? This is somebody that got out of it.
Yeah.
It's not clear to me that she got into a better cycle of life, because she just took herself from the freedom they had at the farm. They are an animal-run farm, and just went and subjugated herself back to people again. But she was taken care of, and she was happy to have the stuff that she wants. So I don't really know what she is. What was your thoughts on that?
I puzzled that out for a little bit, trying to think of what that meant. And I think it was kind of along the lines of what you were saying, where I think here's what it made me think of. I thought to myself, we all serve someone.
Mm-hmm.
We all serve something, whether we want to or not. And I think she had a specific thing that she wanted, and she was like, I don't have this thing anymore. What I had was good.
Right.
How can I make this happen again?
Yeah, because the animals were not producing sugar or ribbons. Well, they weren't allowed to wear ribbons either.
Right. And so I think she's incredibly simple-minded, right?
Yes.
Like she wants ribbons and she wants sugar cubes. Who doesn't? Well, I mean,
she wants the comforts of life.
Right. Yeah. That's what I meant. People don't typically eat just sugar cubes. I mean, some people do.
Can.
They can. I just wouldn't. I don't think. Okay, actually, no, they do. They do. They eat Sour Patch Kids and they eat candy. That is pure sugar. Cotton candy. Okay, so yeah, actually, I take back everything I just said. Human beings totally buy sugar cubes. They're just flavored and also shaped like children, and that's also scary to think about.
Donuts are it's fried sugar bread.
It's delicious sugar bread, but you know what's churros. Oh, you're naming all the things I can't eat. I can eat the sugar cubes though. The human sugar cubes, we sell those.
You can get cotton candy.
I did. Okay, so I had cotton candy.
That's gross.
Well, I had cotton candy for the first time in years on Wednesday.
How'd that go?
It was delicious, but like there's like, how it's all sugar. So I even took like a little bit, and I was like, that was probably like 5 tablespoons of sugar. I was like, this is horrible for you.
I don't.
It's all sugar, dude.
I know it is. I just don't know that like a little bit of it, because it kind of just.
I was exaggerating a little bit. Like it's all sugar. Is what I'm trying to say.
It's all sugar. I don't know. Like I mean, if you see what happens if you ever like melt it down, there's there's not much. Like you take a whole thing of cotton candy and you melt it down, it goes into like maybe quarter cup max worth of whatever it is.
Oh, but that's a ton of sugar. That is a ton of sugar. And I only had it was a big piece, but it's fluffy. And then there was like, I want to say there was like a basketball size left amount of cotton candy. And I was like, if I eat all of this, how much sugar would this be?
I don't know. It's so sticky. And
I do think it tastes good. I'm going to be honest. I do think it tastes good, but I haven't had it in years. So I had a little bit and then I gave it away because I was like, I can't eat all this. And I'll also feel horrible. I was already cramping, so I didn't. Sugar does not help.
I imagine it doesn't.
No, it doesn't help. I mean, you wouldn't know. But, men and women, they're just basically the same. So maybe definitely. You do know. Maybe you do know.
I can have periods too.
Oh my. I'm not ready for this conversation today, Connor. I'm trying to remember what I'm saying, but we all want the comforts of life. I think that's a good way of putting it. And I think she went after something that she wanted that gave her what she needed.
She went after the comforts of life and probably feeling safe. She had a guaranteed amount of food to some extent, and she picked that over freedom. This is before things in the farm turned bad, by the way. I think this is pre Napoleon rule.
Yeah.
When she took off, I'd have to look through my notes here. I think I do have it that she
had a different purpose than the rest of the other animals too.
She was a show horse,
right? And the rest of them, I feel like they were more like subject to getting slaughtered, right? Because they had the funeral for the hams, like little pigs. I think of like little piglets as cute, but now after all of this, I'm like, oh, pigs are bad. Pigs, very, very bad. What are you looking up?
I was looking to see when Molly left, so it looks like she was around for the first battle, which would have been during Snowball. Well, not really Snowball's role. It was more diplomatic than actually.
Yeah, they were both kind of ruling together. That's the way I took it when they were.
They disagree. Like it was actually fairly healthy of them to do that. So they would like have a disagreement and then be like, okay, here's my idea, here's your idea. Animals, vote on it. Except the animals were too dumb to come up with their own ideas. So nobody else had any other ideas. And all they could do is just follow the leader.
Right. Yep. But that's kind of my feel.
Chapter 5,
Molly.
Molly goes missing.
Okay. So she goes missing about actually almost precisely halfway through the book. But that's kind of my feel on Molly.
Yeah. So she disappears, and then the military coup happens with Napoleon. And I have to hit on this because freaking Squealer. I hated him probably more than Napoleon.
He was just so funny. Like it was funny the way that Orwell made him come to life, if that makes sense. We're like, yes, I hated him too.
Found his place of, I can weave these really good, intricate, detailed stories.
Yes.
And he changed everybody's mind. And here are the 9 things that I wrote down, at least that I noticed he changed people's mind on. So this is one of the gradual pieces. But he was able to deem that Snowball was a liar and a criminal, and that his words were lies, and his valor in the Battle of the Cowshed were exaggerated, was the beginning of that one. He also convinced the farm animals that Napoleon had always supported building a windmill, and Snowball had stolen his plans. Which
right,
Snowball
completely
was the
opposite.
Yeah, Snowball had been working like day and night on these dang plans for the windmill, and Napoleon had just kind of, he's like the windmill's never going to happen. It's a waste of time. Initially, he wanted to spend more time like focusing on the crops, but afterwards, after he runs Snowball off, he claims that the windmill was his idea and that Snowball had stolen the plan. So he keeps changing the stories about Snowball as we go. Number 3, he convinced the animals that the policy of no interactions with humans was never passed and was part of Snowball's lies. That's when he starts getting a trade broker to go to and from the house and starts making dealings with people.
Right.
Convinced the animals that there was no resolution for the pigs to live in the pigsty, so they moved into the farmhouse and slept in the beds. And there was a resolution, like all the animals had different places that they were set to sleep, and the pigs were in the pigsty, and the horses were in the stables, and the chickens were in the coop, and all of that stuff. Number 5, he changed the law from no animal shall sleep in a bed. We mentioned this earlier, to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. And then number 6, he changed it to no animal shall kill any other animal without cause, was added to the end of it. We mentioned that earlier as well.
And he ends up spinning. All Squealer does is at the end,
it's very
spinning. Obvious. He just keeps spinning things.
And you've seen right there that he gradually kept changing Snowball until the point that Snowball fought with the humans against the animals. And he convinces them that they sent Boxer to the vet. And then eventually some animals are more equal than others. So those are just some of the tales that he spins. And some of it, like the one with Snowball, was the most interesting because it gradually just kept changing. Just a little bit at a time. It was like, yeah, he wasn't as brave as we thought, and his valor was greatly exaggerated. He tried to make us fail our plans, straight up to he was with the enemy and he charged against us, but at Mr. Jones' side. And it was Napoleon. He's like, you guys remember Snowball taking some of the gunshot and he was bleeding? Well, that was because Napoleon bit him. Like that's where as Snowball was moved to the side, Napoleon gets propped up in his place as this benevolent hero that changed everything on the farm for the better, and it furthers the fact, or it lessens the animal's will to kind of revolt against him. I was almost waiting for a second revolt to happen against the pigs. Yeah,
and it doesn't, and that's. I think I want to get to the more practical part of this for sure. We know that, well, we should know at this point that what Orwell has done here is he's created a dictatorship within this animal farm, with Napoleon and his little pigs being kind of the predominant citizens and the most important, and he's obviously their dictator.
Yes.
And I think one thing that I thought was interesting when the book ended, and I'm trying to actually, let me go back. It's in the very first chapter. Hang on. Sorry, not the first chapter. I didn't mean to say that. It's in the last chapter. Come on.
What were you looking for?
Hang on, my thing is not doing what I want it to, and I'm very angry. No, what are you doing? I'm using a book app, and it was working.
And now it's not working.
And now it's not. Hang on, I can. These are short chapters.
Give me a keyword or two.
Hang on, I can find it.
All right. Well.
Okay, here it is.
Okay.
So this is the 10th chapter. It says, years passed, the seasons came and went, and this is a quote from the book. The short animals lived, lives fled by. A time came when there was no one who remembered the old days before the rebellion, except Clover, Benjamin, Moses the raven, and a number of the pigs. There were many more creatures on the farm now, though the increase was not so great as had been expected in the earlier years. I'm getting a spam call. I hate when that happens. Many animals had been born. Sorry, let me get my track back. Many animals had been born to whom the rebellion was only a dim tradition, passed on by word of mouth, and others who had been bought who had never heard mention of such a thing before their arrival. They accepted everything that was told about the rebellion and the principles of animalism, especially from Clover, for whom they had had an almost filial respect, but it was doubtful whether they understood very much of it. Here's the point I want to get to with this that's very interesting. The moment I read that, I thought of Ronald Reagan's quote, where he's like, we have to protect freedom, or else we're going to be telling our grandchildren what it was like to be free in America. But I read this, though, and I'm almost going to disagree with Reagan and say that as time passes, even they could barely remember it. They barely remembered what it was like in that very beginning to be free. And how through time, their thoughts had been distorted. There had been so much propaganda. They've been told so many different things. They couldn't remember it. Don't worry. Squealer will remember it for you. Yep. And so I think about that quote and it scares me more because I think, actually, I don't know how well I'm going to remember it. Like, even think about before COVID happened. We had way more freedom before COVID happened. And sometimes it's still kind of this, not a dim memory, but it takes time for me to remember what that was like. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, no, definitely. And so that scares me. And we think about Boxer, the horse, and he was much stronger than the pigs were. He could have just taken them all out. Oh yeah, even the dogs didn't stand a chance. No, the dogs didn't stand a chance at all. Now my app is working. Oh, thank you so much for working now. And I think actually there's two different things that I read along with this book. I also read two prefaces that Orwell had written and what had inspired the book. What inspired the book was him seeing a carriage go by with an incredibly strong horse with a human. And he thought if that horse was smart enough to, he could easily overtake that human. Yes. And that's what got him started on this. So I think Boxer is a more integral character than we think that he is, because I think that was probably what Orwell kind of started with, was that horse, Boxer. And Boxer is the one that ends up getting slaughtered even after all of that hard work that he did. I would agree. And I kept trying to think of what Boxer technically represented. And I think, especially in the type of communist setup that we're looking at here, that's happened on this farm, is Boxer is the brave and loyal subject, if you will, who believes that the work he's doing is for the betterment of the rest of the animals on the farm. And he works at it with all of his heart and with all of his strength throughout the entire book. He works harder than everybody. But in the end, he's used up. And once he's no longer of any use to the pigs, they get the last bit of use out of him, which was to send him to the glue factory, basically. Instead of having him retired in a small patch of the field.
eating grass and being able to take it easy. That's what he worked for that entire time, but he didn't want to get there until he was sure that the rest of the farm was taken care of. But ultimately he put his head down. He didn't think too hard about what he was being told. He just believed it and worked himself effectively to death.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he's one of the bigger tragedies, I think. And so for people that see the changes that happen in their country, in their government, or whatever type of structure that they reside in, and they just put their head down and think that if they work harder that things will get better, it very, very well is not going to.
I think that Boxer had good intentions, for sure. He had good intentions, and these dictators, these pigs, took advantage of those good intentions. And I gotta be honest, I see that a lot around here in America too, where I look at some things and I go, I think your intentions here are good, but you are 100% being used for a political agenda. 100% being used. And they don't see it. And I think that's what's so scary about this. It is so gradual. It is so gradual. And that keeps happening. And before you know it, us on the outside of the book are like, oh my gosh, this guy's totally lying through his teeth, squealer through his little pig snout, spreading these lies. And we can see it. But the animals they just can't, because they're so engrossed in it, and they haven't looked outside and like really taken a step back. And part of it too is like they didn't have time to think about it. Why? Because they worked so hard.
Yep.
They were always working, and Orwell makes a point of saying this in the book. They're working so hard, they just didn't have time to think about it as well. There's all these things that this dictatorship did to make sure that they didn't think too hard, that they were always dependent on them, and that they followed their rules. And sure enough, they did. And
that was part of Boxer's thinking too, is that once he retires, then he'll take time to remember to memorize the rest of the alphabet.
Right, because he can only do like what?
ABC.
ABC. I thought it was 2 letters. But
it might have been A and B, and then if he got to B and C, he forgot how to start. And
yeah, so he wasn't incredibly smart. Poor guy. So this is very scary. And I read a couple prefaces to Animal Farm by Orwell. And as we kind of talked about in the beginning, he kind of had some issues trying to get this published.
Right.
Pretty common story that we hear now too, with books being banned or they're having a hard time getting published or being taken off shelves. We see this a lot too. And so apparently he had one publisher that was going to start by accepting the book, and then he consulted the Ministry of Information about this book. I want to say this was in Britain. I want to say, but I'm not 100% certain. But all you have to.
I didn't read any of these prefaces, so I can't help you. I was trying to make sure that the knowledge I had of Animal Farm was minimal at best, because I wanted it to be my I guess most pure reaction to it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you read something else and people start defining things for you, then you go into it and you go, okay, the pigs are the commies, and the horse and them are the civilians, and you just start labeling it by how you've been told to interpret it. So I didn't want any of it.
Agreed. I read this after I was done, and obviously there are some things in there, and this is all Orwell's words too. This is what he had intended. And so like the pigs were pretty easy to figure out. The horse is pretty easy to figure out, and he doesn't, with his prefaces, he's really interesting. He had to write one for Ukraine, and he basically says there, he's like, yeah, I don't really want to write too much about the book, because if you can't grab the meaning from the book, then I failed. He's like, but if you want to reach me, I work at the Tribune. I'm like, oh my word. Hilarious. But basically one of the publishers was going to try to publish it, and he consulted the Ministry of Information, who warned him about publishing it, because again, this had to do with like anti-Russian literature and just trying to suppress that. And basically what he says in his letter, I think it was to Orwell, was that, listen, he said, another thing, it would be less offensive if the predominant caste in the fable were not pigs. I think the choice of pigs as the ruling class will no doubt give offense to many people, and particularly anyone who's a bit touchy, as undoubtedly the Russians are. And this is what Orwell says, and I want to get your thoughts on it about how it applies today. So this is Orwell, and I quote, "This kind of thing is not a good symptom. Obviously, it is not desirable that a government department should have any power of censorship, except security censorship, which no one objects to in wartime over books." And then the quotations, and that are over books which are not officially sponsored. But the chief danger to freedom of thought and speech at this moment is not the direct interference of the MOI, Ministry of Information, was it Ministry of Information? Yeah, Ministry of Information, or any official body. If publishers and editors exert themselves to keep certain topics out of print, it is not because they are frightened of prosecution, but because they are frightened of public opinion. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I'd probably have to read it over to digest it a bit more, but at least on that last part about them.
That's where I want to get you
at.
The
publicist, is that what they said? The publicist was afraid of public opinion?
So Orwell in this preface was basically saying that the greatest threat that we have is not the Ministry of Information or official bodies. He said the reason why these publishers didn't do it was because they were afraid of public opinion, which we see a lot today in corporations where they could easily do things, but they're too scared of people's opinions to actually do certain things. It seems like you could
swap out a few words there. You know, it's not the Ministry of Information. It's not the fact checkers.
And kind of a certain level of political correctness as well. Does that make sense?
I think it does, but I feel like it can kind of go. Trying to decide. I think that it can kind of go both ways. I mean, they're afraid of public opinion. Yeah, no. Can you send me that? I'd like to be able to kind of read over it just a little bit, so if I can recall it.
Yeah, I can send you that. But when I was reading it, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. Oh, I still know how to screenshot on this thing.
Even better. Is that coming on Messenger?
No. So I'm pretty low tech when it comes to my tablet. I think I only have email on here.
Email will work.
I do have email. But a lot of, if you read these, and I didn't expect you to read them, by the way, Connor, these were just things that were already kind of attached to the book that I was reading. I was like, yeah, I want to read these and see. And the certain one that I read was actually suppressed. It wasn't found until later. So I think it's kind of interesting that never really showed up. It didn't show up until 1973.
Oh, wow.
So this was a little bit after Animal Farm was published.
Okay.
But he writes, and the entire thing that he writes about is the freedom of the press. That's his overarching, I guess he did write a lot of essays, but it seems kind of like essay form of talking about freedom of the press and why they're not willing to publish these kind of things that go against, I guess, just go against Russia. And I think I am correct. He was talking specifically about the British press as well in this. He also has an Ukrainian preface where he talks a little bit. Let me find it here. Oh, you don't want to hear me sing. Connor also doesn't like to hear me gulp, which is obviously very offensive.
No, I'm not one of those people that like the ASMR.
Oh, that is so
when
weird.
You hear people smacking and crunching away on food. I don't like it, and that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
I'm gonna read through this paragraph one more time. I'm just gonna do it out loud for the sake of not leaving a blank part in this track here. But
I could just talk randomly
If you want to, go for it. I just want to make sure that I get my head wrapped around this entirely before I comment and say something extra stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're going to say anything stupid.
Oh, I'm liable to say something stupid.
I'm sure we've already said some stupid stuff at some point, but and even if you read the last part of that, he also says, and I quote, "In this country, intellectual cowardice is the worst enemy a writer or journalist has to face, and that fact does not seem to me to have the discussion it deserves."
So at least the first part there, him saying that it's not desirable for a government department to have any power of censorship. He does provide an exception there,
yes.
Which is security censorship during war, which I find interesting just because in the last couple of administrations, we've made like public declarations about what our military exploit was going to be, when it was going to happen. I do think that most of those are usually as a forewarning to citizens in that area that they might want to get out. To the innocents in that population. Unfortunately, I guess there's no real way to let them know without letting the enemy know. Especially in the Middle East when they've built bunkers and tunnels underneath all these cities and stuff. And I don't know how you get around that. But I would agree heavily, and I think we should take his words quite seriously, that you don't want the government to have that ability. And right now, I wouldn't say that we have the government. Oh, the government's not the sole proprietor of news and information here, but they are so tied in with the mainstream media.
Yeah, no, they're working hand in hand. They're skipping along in a field together.
We're not going to the government to go get our news. We're going to the media, who the government has their hands in their pockets, and vice versa. And if they don't want something covered, then it doesn't really get covered, and it's left to the real journalists out there that have some integrity to go out and against the powers that be, publish a story that is not going to be well liked.
Yeah, and I think there's even a part in here where he talks a little bit about that. He's like, on one controversial issue after another, the Russian viewpoint has been accepted without examination and then publicized with complete disregard to historical truth or intellectual decency. So anything that goes against that would be kind of pushed away. And I feel like we see that quite a bit in America as well, where they kind of have one viewpoint and they don't take any time to, I think these two things are really important: historical truth and intellectual decency. I think about even some of the stuff with like the 1619 Project, which both liberal scholars and conservative scholars are like, this is not historically accurate, and there is nothing that is intellectually decent about this piece. Yet it's something that is being accepted even now. So I feel like when I read this book and I looked through some of Orwell's own writings regarding some of his struggle with trying to get the book out and his argument for it, he even quotes, and he says, I gotta find it because it was a good quote. He says, "I detest what you say. I will defend to the death your right to say it." I think that's a quote from someone else. But when I looked at these different writings, history repeats itself. It seems this was written in 43, or it was published in 43, and I feel like we're seeing a lot of the same trends. Granted, America is not a dictatorship. We are a republic. We're the closest thing on earth to a democracy, but we are indeed a republic.
Constitutional republic, I believe.
So we're not quite a dictatorship, but you can start to see some of our leaders, if you look at them and you hear words like totalitarianism thrown out there by people on the right, and you don't hear dictatorship quite as much in 2021. You're like, they're just making things, they're just saying words. But Orwell talks quite a bit about this, and you see the same patterns from Animal Farm in America, from people who want it to slowly become totalitarian. And I talk about people who are mostly high up in the government, and there's people that with good intentions that are willing to follow along without taking the time to think about what they're being told. I kind of think when I heard about like misinformation and sorry if I'm rambling on, Connor, you should stop me.
Keep going. I'm still processing the last half of that paragraph, so
okay. I thought a lot about Trump, and I thought about like Trump and Snowball, like those two kind of got together in my brain somehow, where like at first some of it was like, yeah, some of that's kind of true, and like maybe that, and then suddenly it gets so completely flipped on its head, where like it starts off with Trump like he's really horrible to women, he's not great with women. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then it totally turns like Trump's a white supremacist. I'm like, wait, whoa, hang on. Like, I'm not sure about this. Like, there's literally like 5 minutes of him denouncing white supremacy. Like, this is seeming not right. And even Boxer, I want even him in the book, he's like, when Squealer is telling these lies about Snowball that are like basically he was on the side of Mr. Jones during the battle, he was like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound true. And then Squealer kind of keeps convincing him that this is the truth. And what I think is interesting about Snowball is that Snowball is by no means a perfect character in this book.
No, he was not.
And you could even say that Trump had some authoritarian tendencies that never made it into the actual law. And I don't know why I'm making this comparison, but it kind of feels right, where I'm like, yes, there are some things about Trump that are not great.
Definitely some things that were not great about him.
Yeah, and I could give you a long laundry list of them, just as I could with Joe Biden, but Joe Biden's are far worse in my most humble opinion. But he's not a white supremacist. He had created more jobs for the Black community. I believe he got more Black voters as well, from what I remember. He got more Latino voters.
I know he did in Florida. I don't know about overall. I can't remember that. I can't remember those details.
I can't remember either, but I know he did fairly well as a Republican for minority populations.
Yeah, and who had been labeled as a racist and a sexist.
Right. And listen, maybe some of those things have some truth to them in regards to him being not great with women. But when you look at the results, you're like, wait, that's not lining up with what I'm seeing. They're saying this, but I'm seeing something else. And so in the book too, they're like, wait a minute, you're saying this, but I'm seeing something else. And they're like, no, that's not actually what you're seeing. And they're like, oh, well, okay. And then, eventually maybe the sheep come in and say, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And sometimes that does happen in real life, where you're having a conversation. It's like, you're racist, Trump is bad, all Democrats are good. And it's like,
it wears you down. You get tired of it.
And there are, again, you and I have talked about, there is a huge distinction between liberals and leftists. And I'm fine with liberals. Leftists, I have a little bit less respect for, because it's very difficult to have a conversation with them without it turning super ad hominem-y. You know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
So there's a lot of things that as I was reading this book and reflecting on it, that I saw a lot of similarities to super recently. Because I think we are having from at least the Biden administration, we're having there seems to be a very dictatorship feel from him, where he's no longer this nice grandpa. Like, he just seems like a dirty old man. Like, that's how he comes across on stage. He won't take any questions. He's not coherent, like everything, and then he's trying to force people to do things that they don't want to do. He's just kind of has a nasty kind of dictator feel to him that kind of makes my skin crawl. And so
it feels like it's progressively gotten worse throughout the last several presidencies. And I can't speak too much to Bush's, because I was pretty young and uninvolved then.
Same.
And and even during Obama's administration, like, I feel like that was probably one of the more normal presidencies, probably the last one. where everybody went out and they voted, and yeah, it was contentious between the parties, but it wasn't anything compared to what happened when Obama left office and we had Trump and Hillary running against each other. And Obama definitely took some liberties with executive orders.
He issued a ton of executive orders.
He did quite a few. So I
mean, so did Trump, though. Trump did
that's
too.
what I'm saying. It's like Obama did, and then Trump did as well, and Biden's doing more.
Biden did more in a smaller period of time, as far as not more, but like a lot more than they had done in the beginning of their presidencies.
I really want to find that one. But I know within
I just remember it because when Biden became president, what did he immediately do? He shut down the pipeline, right? And then there was a lot of news going around that he had just put out a ton of executive orders, more than like any other president. And so maybe you can confirm or deny that.
First 100 days. That webpage is gone now. All right, somebody tell me where it is.
I don't know where it is.
I do recall it was within the first 100 days. I think in the first 100 days, Biden had more executive orders than all 4 years of Trump and maybe even all of Obama. I'm gonna make my way through this article here. Who's this from? This is from NBC, April of 2021. So Trump vowed to remake the government using executive orders. He said would quickly undo many of Obama administration's policies. So yeah, he did set out to do that. He signed 29 in his first 100 days. But Biden, who vowed to undo many of Trump's policies using executive orders, signed more than 40 in his first 100 days. And for Trump, throughout his first 100 days, he signed 29 pieces of legislation. Biden, on the other hand, only signed 11, according to the White House. But his COVID-19 relief package was much larger than any of the other measures that Trump had. So we got size differences with the policies as well.
So basically, he signed a lot of executive orders.
Biden outdid Trump's by 11 there? Yeah, 11.
Yeah. I think both Republicans and Democrats completely abuse executive orders.
To no end, it seems. Yeah. They don't really stop. I'm trying to find if there's been like a full-on tally. I keep just
I'm sure
saying,
there is somewhere around there.
Yeah, so let's see. Cool. I love graphs. This is much easier to read. Biden 42 in the first 100 days, Trump 29, Obama 19. So it increased by 10 from Obama to Trump, and then it increased from Trump to Biden. They actually listed 42 instead of the 41 or the 40. So it's 13. So it's increased each time. Legislation signed, Trump actually did way more than Obama and Biden in the first 100 days. Biden is 11, Trump is 29, Obama was 14.
Yeah, which is that's annoying. It's annoying that they would issue so many of them. I guess that's one thing Obama. I guess one of the things he did okay was not signing as many executive orders.
I mean, there are some things that I think Obama did right. I would say he didn't abuse the executive orders as much. But yeah, it just seems like each presidency so far since after, I mean, I guess kind of since Obama, but like compared to what we have now, it seems like a cakewalk.
Yeah.
And on top of it, the political parties have just gotten really, really heated and contested. And I think a lot of that has to do with the rise of social media, because it was not nearly as big back then in 2008 when Obama took over.
Yeah, social media just allows a lot of people to just attack others that they barely
with no consequences.
Yeah, there's really no consequence for it. And what a better world is to say something nasty and mean to someone else with no real consequence. Person's dream, right? Me, I don't 100% get that, because I'm very particular when I'm talking to people online. Like if I really want to have a conversation with them, I'll probably just reach out to them to talk to me in person, like I'm talking to you now, or, talk on the phone. I think that's a lot better, but I don't post a lot of content that gets people mad.
Yeah. And
if I do, no one says anything. So that's, that's good, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. I think social media has broken down and destroyed conversation in America. And I've got a lot more faith in these long form videos and podcasts where people can sit down and have discussions of differing opinions on things, or they're in different experiences and their outlooks on the world. And you don't get that with social media. And I think at this point I would consider it more of a detriment to society than any type of gain that comes out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%.
And it sucks because it's like I see all these different things, charities or organizations, missions work in and out of the country, all these different causes. And there are a lot of good things that come out of it, but I think we're looking at a gross negative overall. It's just the good that the internet was supposed to accomplish it's backfiring, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But my biggest concern is we know that man's heart is evil. I believe in depravity. I think that's just naturally how we go. And I feel like if it's not with this, it's going to be something else. And so sure, we can get rid of social media, but then there will be something else. There's always going to be something else.
We might be going backwards somewhat, where pre MySpace and Facebook, the main source of communication with people was what? Email? Newsletters?
Yeah, I used to. Well, you and I were not that old. I'm 23.
I'm 28.
You're 28. Yeah, we used just email. We would email. I even sent letters back in the day.
Yep.
I sent letters back in the day, as if I'm that old.
But trying to reach an audience with letters, even if you've got a whole printing thing behind you, you still got to get them all addressed and stuff, and you're pretty limited to what people can see. You're limited in a way that your primary targets are the direct recipients of those letters, where you put a post and it's open and people can share it and retweet it, and save it and repost it and pin it. You can reach all sorts of unintended audience that you never even knew existed. You can't do that with physical
Well, that's
letters
what we're trying to do now,
or
right?
email.
We're trying to reach everybody with our incredible podcast.
Oh, yes. But as of right now, as the censorship on social media and some of the other issues have caused different people with different mindsets to break away from centralized social media, such as Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And everybody's kind of finding their own little corner on the internet. I think we're kind of going back to the way things might have been, which I don't know that it's better necessarily. It'll be more disjointed again. So maybe it'll be a little bit more peaceful because there'll be less clashing. If you get all the conservatives leaving Facebook and Twitter for more conservative free speech supporting platforms, and you don't get a lot of liberals going there because they don't want to put up with all the conservatives commenting on their posts. And likewise, I don't know if it's going to be better or not, but I think we are headed towards a more disjointed type of social media. And it's probably going to look a lot like to where, if you're conservative, you subscribe to the Fox News newsletter. So you got conservative media. You only get what you're going for. And there's not a lot of exposure to anything that you have not purposely sent your way, such as a newsletter or a mailing, or any other type of feed that, like, you kind of have to just go out and get it.
Yeah. I think that we are going to have a more disjointed social media, but more broadly speaking, we're going to have a more disjointed country. Regardless, I kind of get a little bit split on. I mean, I think it's inevitable. I think conservatives, they're just going to get tired of being censored. They're going to be tired of getting beat up on, and they're going to naturally go somewhere where they can do those things. I kind of think about Molly a little bit, actually, where it's like, I can go do more over here instead of being with you guys. That's kind of how I feel about it. When it comes to social media, and maybe I'm biased because I am a conservative, but I feel like I do get quite a bit of liberal media. Like, I think I understand pretty well what they're talking about because it's the dominant form of thought, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I even follow friends. I look at their posts who do not agree with me on the same things, and I am very much exposed to their ideas. I'm exposed to the mainstream media, and then I also am exposed to conservative media as well, typically because the mainstream media is not incredibly reliable anymore in regards to truth, and I tend to get more statistics and facts when it comes to conservative news, so that's really nice. But yeah, we are going to see, I think we are going to see a split. Well, we're already seeing a split, and I think that when you have one side, and I think both sides do this to an extent, but I think one side does a bit more viciously than the other. When you start calling people racists, when you start calling them bigots or transphobes or homophobes for believing anything that's different than the dominant belief, then they just cast you out, and no one wants to deal with that. It's kind of what I talked about in the beginning when it comes to reasoning with people that don't even want to take the time to reason or understand that there's another side. If they automatically assume that you have the worst of intentions, I'm not going to be able to convince you of anything if you think I'm a horrible person. But I have a lot of reasons for believing what I believe. It's not because I'm a puppy torturer, like Dr. Fauci. But I digress. Had to sneak that in there. But when it comes to liberals, I assume that I can tell that they have good intentions, where I'm like, I can see where you're coming from, but let me see if I think if I give you a few of these facts, maybe you might see it this way, or maybe you might have something to think about. I might not change their mind. I probably wouldn't change their minds. But we could still have, again, if it were a liberal, you can probably have a good discussion. I've had discussions with people who are not of the same mindset as me, and we are all friends at the end of the day. With leftists, I don't think that would happen, because you don't typically have a good friendship with someone that you think is a bigot or you think is a racist. It just doesn't work out very well.
Yeah, and to hit on conservatives along with this, calling them libtards and sheep and all the other
I think
pejoratives
that's wrong.
are it's not helping. And
absolutely not.
It ruins your framework for seeing them as people with authentic ideas, or at least somewhat authentic. Maybe authentic intentions.
Yeah.
The intentions are good. Maybe the idea hasn't been fleshed out all the way, and that goes. I cannot. When you start attaching labels like that, it just makes them less than human.
Right, and all these people are, again, most conservatives, actually, I think it's really important as a conservative to be pro-life, right? I'm pro-life, you're pro-life. If you're not pro-life, Connor, let's talk about it. But I know you're pro-life. That we believe that everyone is created equal. I don't think that everyone is created equal in intelligence. I don't.
I was going to say, I believe people are created with equal value, equal worth. But people are not equal.
Right. They're not equal in the sense of different talents. Like I will never be a football player. I will never be a basketball player. I will never be incredibly athletically inclined, just because of the way that God made me. But we do believe that all human beings have inherent worth and a certain level of respect that I will give to mostly all people. I think all people. And I think that when we are talking to, especially when I do have a lot more respect for liberals. I do have a lot. So to call them libtards, I'm like, no, absolutely
not.
not.
At all.
But I have respect for all people, and to call them names, it's a logical fallacy. Like you're playing by a logical fallacy. If you're doing what the left does and calling people names, you're no better than them, and you should just stop.
And it's also childish and immature.
It's incredibly childish and immature. It's like if you're calling them names, then you don't have a good argument as well. You don't have a good argument.
Because if that's where you're at, then clearly your thoughts have not progressed beyond the 6th grade level. And quite frankly, even if you are claiming to be conservative, I can't take your opinion seriously if you've resorted to name calling.
Right. And I feel that way about conservatives who really just call people names, and I don't see that as much, which is good, but when I do see it, or I just kind of see something that just seems to just make fun of anyone who doesn't believe what they do in a really disrespectful manner, I'm like, well, I don't feel like this is going to open a lot of door for conversation.
No, I don't think it opened a lot of doors for conversation in regards to the church and being like, you're a sinner and you're damned to hell, as your opening line to trying to get people to at least talk about Jesus or look at the person of Jesus and see what he taught. It's not a good way to start it off by calling them a sinner and that they're going to go to hell for eternity.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hoping that has retired itself a little bit. I don't hear that quite as much anymore.
No, I'm using it as an example from the past where it's like this really pushed a lot of people away from the church and had the opposite effect of what they were trying to do.
Is almost, they kind of overcompensated, right? They were like, now we're going to be overly accepting, maybe a little bit overly accepting of things that we probably shouldn't be accepting of. When they kind of hug culture is what I'd like to say. Yes. They give culture a nice long hug and they're there for a while and they don't ever come back. But the same principle applies, right? Of just kind of being a little bit, I think the word's obnoxious and name calling and disrespectful. And I think if any side does that, I'm kind of against it, where I'm like, well, let's just talk about it, if it becomes, and here's one thing, and here's why I was hesitating when I said I respect all people. I do have every human being has inherent dignity that I want to give them, but there are some people that I respect way more than others, right? For example, I hope it's very obvious I don't respect Joe Biden very much, but I do see him as someone who has been made by God and who does have some level of dignity, which is why I get upset that he's an old man with dementia that they're, propping on the stage, and it's very obvious he can't even get a sentence together. So it's that mixed feeling of disrespect for him, but also still remembering his dignity as a human being. And so that's why I say I respect some people more than others. Yeah.
Maybe it's a kind of a differentiation between respect and honor, where you can honor their position. Like you can honor a boss, but maybe you don't respect them.
Yeah, I think that's another part of it. I don't think it necessarily replaces I think dignity, respect, and honor. I
think they're all their own entities.
Yes, for sure. And we totally went on a rabbit trail, and it was great. So
it was great. But back to that second part of George Orwell's paragraph, and to refresh here, I'll read it for everybody. The chief danger to freedom of thought and speech at the moment is not the direct interference of the MOI or any official body. If publishers and editors exert themselves to keep certain topics out of print, it is not because they are frightened of prosecution, but because they are frightened of public opinion. And I want to get that last part, even though you didn't highlight it. In this country, intellectual cowardice is the worst enemy a writer or journalist has to face, and that fact does not seem to me to have had the discussion it deserves. I'm kind of going back and forth on this one, because, and what was the MOI again? Something
Ministry of Information.
Ministry of Information.
And I think that was it's a British. Sorry, I had to put my glasses down, and I was looking at the screen. I'm kind of an old lady when it comes to technology. If you guys didn't see what happened, but I was talking away from the mic, and Connor's like, "You idiot! Get next to the
get back to the mic.
Get Jordan. Back to the mic." I don't even remember what I was saying, but yes, it is the Ministry of Information. Okay. It's some sort of British thing that I have
so
no
the government,
idea about.
Censorship. Or any other official body. So he's stating that the danger to freedom of thought and speech at that particular moment when he wrote this, it wasn't like direct interference from a governing body or another official. It was publishers and editors working to keep certain topics out of print. That part I can find myself completely agreeing with, is that they've become cowardly and won't post these things that go against, the current or the primary current of thought that they're dealing with in the country. The last part of that I'm a little bit iffy on, saying that they're frightened. They're not frightened. Oh, it's not because they're frightened of prosecution. I'm guessing by that he's meaning like lawsuits.
Yes.
But because they are frightened of public opinion. And I guess I I would love more of his thoughts on exactly what he means by public opinion. And in this, like the way it equates in my mind would be a lot of the extremely progressive, or maybe not even progressive, but at least the woke crowd, where it's like, this is kind of the mainstream thought. And like Dave Chappelle recently making jokes about transgenders, because quite honestly, on the comedy stage, everybody and everything should be able to be made fun of. And they want equal treatment, but and the thing is, like, I've never heard his comedy, and it's never sounded like he's punching down. He's not punching down because they're a minority group. He brings himself into a lot of it, and a lot of the things that he talked about were about a dear friend of his that was transgender, that because that friend supported him, and the transgender, I don't even want to say the transgender community, the woke community, just mobbed that person so much, they ended up taking their life. And so he kind of brings a lot of this to the forefront on his last special. And surprisingly, Netflix, in this case, the publisher, supported Chappelle, but they kind of doubled down, kind of didn't double down. They're in contest, I guess, in a sense, with what Orwell's talking about here, is with the public.
Yeah, and
even if it's not the majority of the public, this is the loudest. This is the loudest portion of the public.
Yeah. No, that's kind of the same kind of parallel that I was drawing. And regarding your question on wanting to hear more of his thoughts on this, this is the very beginning of his essay. So this is kind of his thesis paragraph.
Okay.
So if you want me to, I can send you the rest of it.
Heck yes, I will read that.
But I think that you'll find it fairly convincing and fairly well thought through. I think a lot of the things that he talks about in the essay are things that it's like 100% today. Like there's another paragraph that I went through that actually has to do a lot with Dave Chappelle as an example of, you know, what is unfashionable to say.
Right.
He said a genuinely unfashionable opinion is almost never given a fair hearing. You think about anyone who says something that's of common sense and it's not given a fair hearing. Again, Dave Chappelle. And this is why I'm so taken in by Orwell, is because he has a good understanding of this as someone who is trying to fight it and get his book out there. Connor, you might want to look this up, but I believe Animal Farm is, I want to say it's banned in certain countries because of what it represents.
Let us find out. Panama City, Florida, actually. Bay County schools banned Animal Farm in 1987.
Wow.
In the 1960s, the novel had been challenged in Wisconsin and New York State.
Wow. But I'm thinking there should be around the world. I mean,
yeah, you have to give me a second to find somebody that gives a good list.
Because I looked it up before, and I'm trying to remember. I want to say China, for sure.
Let me change my search words here.
Yeah, I'd say maybe what countries. And in all fairness, I should have looked it up before, but I didn't. So here we are.
I got a list of fur bans.
Of what?
Fur bans where they banned the skinning of animals for their pelts.
Okay, maybe write in which countries have banned the book Animal Farm by George Orwell. Try that. That's not what I was talking about.
I gave up on using that other keyboard, by the way. So sorry, everybody, for the clickety clack. I happen to love the way it sounds.
You're not sorry.
It's not going away.
You are not sorry.
No, because I'd rather them listen to that for 5 seconds as I type in, 15 words instead of listen to me.
Breathe.
Go for like 30 seconds trying to type and mess this stuff up. It's just when you go from a keyboard that you know to a keyboard you don't know. Oh man, that messes it up big time.
That's fair. I don't blame you.
I'm continually getting things about Animal Farm being banned in the US. Let me see if it mentions other countries.
This is bizarre because you should be able to find this.
Let's see.
Hang on. What countries? I'm getting in here. What countries banned Animal
So
Farm.
the U.S., along with George Orwell's novel 1984, Animal Farm was banned from the 1977 International Book Fair in Moscow, so Russia. 1986, due to persistent objections by Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Bulgaria. The production of Animal Farm was banned from the Theater of Nations festivals in the United States. Is it still banned in Russia?
I'm seeing Cuba and North Korea. Well, North Korea bans everything. But that does not surprise
North Korea
me.
is not a surprise on there for what would be banned. I'm gonna choose a different search.
What are you searching in there? That is getting weird results.
I mean, is it weird? It's just specifying where in America it was being banned.
So I'm seeing that it was banned. It was censored in Vietnam, most likely Kenya. And I'm also seeing United Arab Emirates was banned in schools. Ooh, and they say there's a couple of other different books that are also banned as well.
I believe his 1984 book was banned as well.
Yeah, which is of no surprise because it's even more dystopian. So
somebody took this as today we learn about the classic tale of animal rights.
Oh my word. Okay. Someone's getting the wrong
and a few
impression.
more books that were meant for adults but given to children. Trying to clarify if this is a collection of books they're saying that were banned or if it is specifically Animal Farm. No, I believe this is for Animal Farm. 1965, Wisconsin survey revealed that John Birch Society had challenged the novel's use, objecting to the words "masses will revolt." Really? 1968, New York. 1977, Russia. 1982, Georgia, not the state, is the country. 1987, Florida. Was banned from middle and high schools in Panama City by... Why is it... Florida and Panama City do not make sense to me. I mean, my geography is not great, but Panama and Florida are two very different places.
Yeah.
By the Bay County superintendent, 44 parents filed a suit against the district claiming that the instructional aids policy denied constitutional rights and the book was reinstated along with 64 other books. 2002, United Arab Emirates banned from schools along with 125 other books. The Ministry of Education banned it on the grounds that it contained written or illustrated material that contradicts Islamic and Arab values, including pictures of alcoholic drinks, pigs, and indecent images.
Okay, well,
that sounds... I need to look into this more. This is so curious why these other countries banned the book.
But
for fairly not the reasons I thought it was going to be banned for, I will say.
Yeah. Indecent
images.
Yeah.
And a book about animals.
Yeah, that's definitely...
Did the pigs hike their skirt up a little bit too high towards the end then?
I feel like they did some worse stuff.
There's some other worse jokes I could make here, but I will refrain from myself.
Oh, good. Good, Connor. Glad to hear. But as we wrap this up, what do you feel like is a good way for us to end this? What would be your last words?
I've been debating if I would read. So I kind of went through this, either taking a break halfway through each chapter or at the end of each chapter and just writing a paragraph or two to summarize what it was.
Yeah.
And I did that at the end of chapter 10. So I've kind of been debating if I would read what I wrote. It's not a crazy ton. It's more than I thought I would write. I don't think there's anything there that I'm against saying on the podcast. But I think I'd kind of like to wrap it up with final thoughts. I don't know if you have anything written or
I think I've yammered on about how I feel, so I'll let you have the final word.
Okay. I'll read it. And these are just my thoughts. You know, I'm not a writing expert, major or minor. Just I kind of just put my thoughts down and I try to make sure that I reconstruct each sentence so that it makes the most sense of whatever I'm trying to say. But my final thoughts on chapter 10 and the book in general was we've come full circle. Animal Farm is now Manor Farm again. The living conditions are the same as when Mr. Jones had owned it. The animal laws or commandments or what have you have been completely erased. Only one law remains, which states something to the effect of all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Very few of the original animals are left who remember the time before the animal rebellion. The pigs grow fatter as the farm becomes more prosperous, yet nothing has improved for the other animals. The pigs are also in arms with the humans, making deals and such, and now the rest of the farm animals can't distinguish between the pigs and the human farmers. Final thoughts was that life is wrought with inescapable struggle. The real story lies with how we handle those struggles. People are always looking towards something better, but when they forget the past, they have nothing to compare with the present. When history is forgotten, you get what you deserve. No matter how dumb, illiterate, or forgetful you may be, strive to educate yourself. Depending solely on others to lead and think for you makes you incredibly vulnerable to the rise of tyrants. They are manipulative, cunning, and will stop at nothing to take advantage of the vulnerable. They change the way you remember history, and they make you forget the past. Tyrants will change faces, countries, religions, and race. They can arise from anywhere, at any time, and by any means. They may come with guns and whips out of the gate, or they might be more cunning despots and tyrants who will masquerade as a liberator or savior, yet they put your life on the line in place of theirs. And quoting Jordan Peterson, when removing the dikes, pay attention to what comes flooding in. When progress is needed to push out of stagnation, pay attention towards that which you are progressing towards. Those are kind of just my final thoughts on where the animals were at with these things. And by the end, we mentioned it, like they bring in these other animals who never knew of such a thing. And I can't help but think of people that are immigrating to America with these kind of out of date ideas to some extent of what type of country this is. And as we continue on, they will become more and more out of date. They won't know what America used to be like. Our grandkids won't know what America used to be like. Not if we continue to let tyrants and despots have their way and stick our head down and keep working ourselves to death like Boxer did. And I think that probably summarizes most of my thoughts on that book. And as far as that quote from Jordan Peterson goes, first part of it is definitely his. I don't know if he quoted it from somebody else. I tried looking for it, couldn't find it. But it seems to me that is kind of one of the core principles of conservatism is when you're removing the dikes, pay attention to what comes flooding in. Inherently, there is an issue with conservatism, though, is that when it goes too far, they don't make any progress. Nothing moves forward. Everything stays the same. And then with the issue that we have with liberals or progressives is that as they want to move forward, they tend to forget to ask why something was put in place in the beginning. And they don't look past getting rid of whatever that is, whether it's the nucleus, the nuclear family, which is just seems to be one of the more optimal ways that society structured itself, is they remove those things without thinking about what can come flooding in. And like everything, there really just needs to be a balance. Like, don't stay stagnant in one place. You don't want to become dogmatic or traditionalist, where it's like, this is what we do because we've been doing it for hundreds of years and it's not going to change. Because I think all of us do want to reach towards, at least for the general populace, you want to reach towards a better tomorrow. We want to move along with the times. But staying stagnant or steeped in tradition isn't going to get us anywhere. But likewise, when venturing out, you need to be careful of what it is that you're doing and the repercussions that come with it. And that seems to be a fundamental tear in the fabric of our society these days, as we become more and more tribal and divided between almost like factions. And nobody's willing to meet in the middle at this point. Or at least that's what it feels like projected by the media. And to some extent, the people we run into.
I think that is a great summary of the book. You don't give yourself enough credit, Connor. And I think that's a good place to end it. I don't really want to add any more. I think that was great. The only thing, I'm going to go back on myself. The only thing I would add is for you all to take a step and read something you disagreed with, or read Animal Farm. It's pretty eye-opening, and take some time to think about it. And you'll enjoy this podcast more if you read the book. But I think that's all I got.
Yeah,
and we'll be doing something like this again soon.
Federalist Papers.
Woohoo!
Coming into December, so in probably 4 or 5 weeks from here.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. So those will be long podcasts. Those are going to be long.
They will be. It might need to actually be a series as I continue to look at the content.
It's going to need to be a series, but we can talk about that off mic. But I think that's all I got.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed going over this and reading some type of dystopian stories. And yeah, I'm excited to do it again and continue doing these book reviews. Yeah, and if you guys like it, just let us know. It helps us kind of figure out what you guys like, what you guys don't like. If you never want us to read another book again, we probably will still. But if you have suggestions for what books you think we should give a try, maybe from the Federalist Papers to White Fragility, just let us know and we'll give it a look. Absolutely. I don't have anything else to add to it. All right. We will podcast you guys later. We figured it out finally. What to say at the end. We'll take it. We'll take it at the end. All right. End it there, Connor. Yep. Just end it now.